If you don't know where to start with Belgium's NIS2 cybersecurity law, then this video is for you. So I'll show you what are the most relevant cybersecurity laws and regulations that are published by Belgium regarding NIS2, how they're structured, what are the most important requirements in those documents, and I'll also show you a couple of templates for policies and procedures that you can actually use for complying with these regulations. Okay, so let me start with the basics. So Belgium published several documents regarding NIS2 and cybersecurity, but I'll focus on the three most important ones. So the first one is the NIS2 Law, which was published in April 2024. And then there is this Royal Decree from June 2024, which is basically an implementing regulation. And there is also this CyberFundamentals Framework that is published by CCB, and that stands for Cybersecurity Center Belgium. And the latest version of this framework is from 2025. And below this video, you'll find a link to an official site where you can actually open all of these documents. Okay, let's dig a little bit deeper in these documents. So NIS2 law is more general. It describes which companies have to comply, how these companies need to register with competent authorities, what are these competent authorities and what is their role, how is the supervision performed, what are the fines. But this law does not really describe in detail how the cybersecurity measures need to be implemented for companies that need to comply. And this is where this Royal Decree comes into play. Basically, this is an implementing regulation, and it describes a couple of things, amongst others the, let's say, competent authorities for each sector that is covered by NIS2 law. But more importantly, this Royal Decree introduces this concept of a reference framework, and basically says that companies that need to comply with the NIS2 law have to choose between a reference framework that is published by a relevant Belgian body or ISO 27001. And as already mentioned, this published framework is called CyberFundamentals, but basically this Royal Decree gives the companies an option whether to go for CyberFundamentals or ISO 27001. And basically this CyberFundamentals is about a list of controls that companies need to comply with. And there is actually three levels of CyberFundamentals, the basic, important and essential. And these three levels actually exist in 2025 revision of this CyberFundamentals, whereas in the older 2023 revision of this CyberFundamentals there was also a small one, which I didn't really see for the 2025 revision. And I'll show you how all these look like in a minute in this video. It is also worth mentioning here that the European Commission has published this Commission Implementing Regulation 2024-2690, and the purpose of this Commission Implementing Regulation, or CIR, is to specify very detailed security requirements for digital companies that have to comply with NIS2. Now, this CIR is applicable only to 3 sectors out of these 18 sectors that are specified in NIS2 directive, and by the way, which are also the same as in NIS2 law in Belgium. So if your company belongs to any of these 3 sectors that covers digital companies, then you will have to comply with CIR, but also with NIS2 law in Belgium and the Royal Decree, and then consequently either CyberFundamentals or ISO 27001. Whereas if your company belongs to any of these 15 sectors that are not covering digital companies, then you will not have to comply with CIR, only with NIS2 law and Royal Decree and either CyberFundamentals and 27001. Now, I know that this becomes a little bit complicated, but the good thing is when you take a look at this CIR, it's, I would say, very similar to ISO 27001 or the CyberFundamentals framework, so that companies that go for either CyberFundamentals or 27001 will not have any larger issues with complying with the CIR. And if you want to learn more about this Commission Implementing Regulation, then take a look at my other video which goes into more depth. Okay, let me now browse through these documents and show you the most important requirements for companies that are in the NIS2 scope. Okay, here on the left hand side I'm showing you the original Belgian NIS2 law in French. For the reason of simplicity, I'm not showing the Dutch version, only the French version. And on the right hand side I'm showing you the automatic AI translation into English. Translation is pretty good, but the formatting is not very good, but anyway, we'll manage with this. Let's just scroll down to see, this is a list of all the articles, and here basically is the article number 3, which defines to which companies does this law apply. And yeah, let's skip to some other chapters that are interesting. So for example, this chapter 3 is about categorization. So as you can see here, it is explained what are the essential entities and then what are these significant entities. And then let's see this most interesting part about cybersecurity risk management measures. As you can see, this is here in this chapter 1. As I mentioned earlier, it's not very detailed. So as you can see, see here, there are many mentions of controls, but it doesn't really go into much more detail. And here in Article 31, paragraph 2, it is also specified about the requirements for training. And by the way, I have a separate video which explains how to organize this NIS2 training. Then there is this chapter 2 about notifications, incident notifications, and then some requirements related to the notification, and also some further definitions here. And then there are some requirements regarding compliance assessment. As you can see here, it is specified that basically this periodic conformity assessment needs to be performed, and this is something that will be described further in a royal decree. And then these assessments will be performed by an assessment body, and also 41 about a voluntarily assessment of compliance. And by the way, in English version, these are the things that are marked in red, because this is something that goes beyond what actually NIS2 directive requires. So these are some additional requirements on top of NIS2 directive. Okay, let's see what are the fines. So in Article 59, these fines are defined. This is the same as in NIS2 directive, up to 7 million euros for important entities, and up to 10 million euros for essential entities. And then there are some interesting requirements here about basically the suspension of activities of the company if it is not compliant, and also prohibiting actually the activity of the managers that are in charge for this company. It even mentions the chief executive officer here. And also it mentions that these persons are actually personally liable also if not complying with this NIS2 law. So this is pretty strict, and this is also something that goes beyond what the NIS2 directive was requiring. Okay, and finally, let's see which sectors are included. So basically all the 18 sectors that are already listed in NIS2 are covered. So let me just browse very quickly. So energy, transportation, banking sectors, market infrastructures, health, and so on. So basically all of these things are already mentioned in NIS2 directive, and also copied here into NIS2 law for Belgium. Okay, let's switch to royal decree. Again, on the left hand side is the French version, on the right hand side is the English translation. This time it's a little bit better formatted. Anyway, let's see what is important here. So in chapter 2 you can actually see this designation of competent authorities, and basically for each sector there is a different competent authority. But let's move forward to this main actually point in a royal decree, and basically this article 4 is about the creation of this reference framework for cybersecurity, and there will be 3 levels. So this basic, important, and essential, and then that the companies can actually choose between this reference framework or ISO 27001. Of course, companies can go for both of them, but I would say majority of company will go either with this reference framework and ISO 27001. And as I mentioned, this reference framework is called CyberFundamentals, and I'll show you how it looks like in a minute. And also Article 6 speaks about a certification against reference frameworks. Okay, and here also in Article 11, paragraph 2, it speaks about voluntary periodic conformity assessment. So basically this is something that important entities can do according to this article. And then the rest of this royal decree is not very interesting for companies that need to comply. Let's now take a look a little bit of the cyber fundamentals. So as I mentioned, there are 3 levels, and this is for a basic level. So let me just briefly show you. So this is this latest 2025 version of it, and here you will see that there are actually 6 chapters around which these controls are made. So govern, identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. And basically these things, or this kind of structure, is copied from this NIS2 Cybersecurity Framework. And as you can see here, you have actually this image that displays these 6 chapters. Now, when we go to this important cyber fundamentals level, basically it has all these 6, but there are actually many more controls. For example, for govern, as you can see here in the table of contents, govern actually takes the whole page, and then goes identify and so on. And when we go for this essential, this one is the, let's say, biggest one, the most demanding one, and you will see here that govern actually has not only one page but also half of the other page. Okay, let me now scroll down just to show you how particular controls look like. So for govern, the first control is this around organizational mission. So you have the definition of what needs to be performed, and then some implementation guidance, and then goes the other control, and the same thing, so definition and the guidance. So the structure here again is going after this US NIST Cybersecurity Framework, but this is also kind of similar to ISO 27002, where actually it describes the implementation guidance for each control. Okay, in this video I'm not going to show you the clauses for ISO 27001, so the second option that companies can go for, but there is actually another video where I explain all the clauses, so you can take a look at this video to learn more about ISO 27001. Okay, and let me now show you how to write documents to cover these requirements, and especially if you choose ISO 27001 as a path for compliance. Okay, I'm showing you now this document called Policy on Information System Security from Advisera's NIS2 Documentation Toolkit. So on the left hand side you can see the version this time in Dutch, and on the right hand side you can see exactly the same version in English. So let's see first what is the table of contents. So as you can see here, let me just show you also this in English. So since this is a top level policy, it doesn't really go into detail. It doesn't describe, let's say, how you do the backup or access control. So for that purpose, you have these other policies and procedures. And here it is mainly about, setting the objectives, measuring them, what are the requirements, risk management, how you control, how you organize security, these kind of things. So let's go a little bit further just to see how these references are done. So for example, here you can see the reference, of course, to the NIS2 directive, and then to this CIR 2690, and then the NIS2 law, and also the royal decree. And finally, there are some references to ISO 27001. So basically all of these are important documents, and actually I'll explain you how all of these documents are used when building this kind of a policy in a minute. But let me first show you one important difference here in this document. So let me go for this section number 6. And this section is about conformity assessment. As you can see, it specifies here that companies have to go for this periodic conformity assessment, which will be verified by a conformity assessment body, and also that company can go for this voluntary conformity assessment. And if you go for this comment that you see that this one is mandatory for essential entities, whereas this one is mandatory for important entities. So if you remember, there was a requirement actually that is specific for NIS2 law, and this is of course something that we added to this template because this is not required by NIS2 directive nor by ISO 27001, which actually brings me to a point on how to build actually these documents for compliance with NIS2 law and royal decree. So I'll explain you how we did it in Advisera, because this could be actually one way to do it. Of course, you can do it in some other way. So first, we developed all the policies and procedures according to ISO 27001. Of course, we added also the suggestions from ISO 27002 or 27005. But the point is that we built first these documents according to these international standards. And then as a second step, we adapted these documents according to the requirements of this Commission implementing regulation, and added or upgraded for everything that this CIR requires. And then as a third step, then we further adapted these documents for local legislation. Of course, in this case, this is Belgium NIS2 law and the royal decree. And we actually found that this kind of three-step process is the best to make sure that nothing is missing. And of course, you can use these templates from Advisera's NIS2 documentation toolkit to speed up the whole process. And in the next video, I'll explain how to use this documentation toolkit. Okay, let me also show you this incident handling policy, this time in French. So as you can see, basically the first page, second page, they're formatted basically the same across all the documents. Whereas when you take a look at the table of contents, you can see that this covers actually the whole incident cycle, beginning from a receipt, treatment, minor incidents, significant incidents, learning from incidents, handling authorities, disciplinary actions, collection of evidence, and so on. So when it goes for this main part of the document, you can see again references to all of these important documents. But actually, let me show you how we adapted these documents for examples for specific Belgium use. Here in this section 5, you can see that the incidents actually need to be reported towards this Center for Cybersecurity. So basically, this is something that is of course relevant only for Belgium. Okay, let me also show you this risk assessment methodology in Dutch. So basically here you can see the table of contents, and again the whole process is defined here. So starting from mandatory cybersecurity measures, risk management principles, risk assessment, the process, assets, suppliers, vulnerabilities, threats, risk owners, impact likelihood, all of these things, and several others. And regarding references, let's scroll down. So as you can see here are references to, again, all of these relevant documents. What we didn't mention here is also the ISO 27005, and basically this document is also following this risk management standard. Okay, I hope this was helpful, and let me know in the comments below if you have any questions about this NIS2 NIS2 Law in Belgium, and I'll answer as quick as I can. And to access these documents from NIS2 Documentation Toolkit, either in French or Dutch, click the link in the description below this video, and you'll be able to open a free demo account for this documentation toolkit and download the free demo documents from this toolkit. And see also my other video which explains how to use this NIS2 documentation toolkit. And if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, and you can also subscribe to my YouTube channel not to miss any of my new videos, and I publish videos about cybersecurity, compliance and governance every week. Thanks for watching!